Before I ask you to introduce yourself, I have to take a minute to just put what this is about, this conference. It takes about 30 seconds. So World Mediators Conference, Mediation Vision 2026. We're discussing a lot of topics, and then we'll take up discussions over the year up to the next conference, which again will be on 18th May, because I am celebrating 18th May as World Mediators Day, because it's Ken Cloke's birthday, and he, for me, personifies what a mediator should be and as a person. So everything is available on YouTube. You just search for Mediator Vikram, you'll find that. And this session that we are doing right now, which Archana has suggested, the topic is, Archana, you want to tell me? I say power imbalance and mediation. That's what we're talking about now. So that's my job done. So Archana, please, first you can introduce yourself, and then Nina can introduce herself, and then from there we'll take the topic as we go. So yeah, Archana.
Okay, wonderful. First of all, thank you to you, Vikram. This is fantastic. And see, you have actually connected people across the globe through this process. And it takes a lot of effort and passion. And I think when we really can sit in our own houses, offices, and connect with everyone other than who is very close to us geographically, we get opportunity to learn. So thank you for that, and wonderful to see you, Nina. This is exactly what Vikram is doing, connecting all of us. So I think this is great.
And Nina, but what Archana gonna write Canada in front of your name?
Yes, so I am actually joining from Toronto, Canada. It's actually 8:30 in the morning. And Vikram, you wanted me to introduce myself, or?
Yeah.
Okay.
Please.
Okay, so very, very briefly, I can say that I am by profession a lawyer and family mediator. I wear many different hats, but the other identity very close to me is a peace builder. And I think I see mediation as a peace building opportunity. And a lot of things I have learned from the same person that I think, Vikram, you were just referring, Ken Cloke. He changed my perception about mediation and freed my spirit as a mediator. And it was never easy to be a lawyer first, coming from right-based approach to going to really interest-based approach. And he allowed that journey. And I think we'll talk about that. But basically, that's what it is. And I just want to speak very briefly about the book that I have co-authored with other friends of mine, which is Domestic Violence in Immigrant Communities, Case Studies. It was published in 2020, and it is actually the cases, the real life cases in family courts. And we have created the case studies for understanding the power imbalance and how people's interests can collide. And it's been actually used as a textbook for training. So it's a research project that we undertook, but I want to really appreciate my co-authors and that journey of research as well. So just leaving it out there.
Perfect. Thank you very much for, like I said, suggesting the topic and being part of the conference. So Nina, please, you can introduce yourself as much as you want to tell us about yourself, and we'll move from there. But lip reading is not going to happen, Nina. That's a session on the last day of the conference. We're going to be talking about lip reading. That's what we'll do.
Unmute. This is how. Yeah, now you can hear me.
Sounds
Sorry.
much better.
Sorry for that. Okay, so my name is Nina. I'm from Sweden, so I'm connecting from Gothenburg. I have worked with some kind of problem solving for over 30 years. And my interest in mediation has always been there, but it took some years for me to understand that it was mediation I was doing. And because of also Ken Cloke, which book Mediating Dangerously as well changed me during my studies, because I studied mediation and conflict intervention. Yeah, this is how I found the Mediator Vikram. So thank you very much for having me. And this is my first time I'm participating, but I'm interested in the subject. So let's see what we can do.
Absolutely. So thank you, Nina, for being part of it. And of course, please attend other sessions. You also, Archana, please attend other sessions. Your Zoom link remains the same. You can drop in for whatever session you want. So, Archana, how do you want to take it forward? It's your topic, your show. We'll come in when you tell us to come in.
So maybe we can have it as a dialogue between the three of us. And I like that, Vikram, when you mentioned that let's make it a free-flowing discussion. So if everyone is okay, then maybe we can just pick one topic and see how that flow goes further from there.
Yeah. So because look, you've written that book, and so basically on power imbalance, you can start wherever you want. I mean, the idea is to just start off, and we'll all be part of it. So however you want to start it.
Yeah, so maybe I can just very briefly start, and Nina, please join me from that point on. But let's just look at the very basic theoretical aspect of it, and then look at the practice challenges about balancing power, and then going into the mediator's powers and then power dynamics. But I think just looking at it, what is power? Because sometimes it's very crucial to understand the context of that. It could be positive, it could be negative. If we look at the power from the positive perspective, which all of us want on our mediation table, it could be the strength the parties bring in or their empowerment. But at the same time, a lot of negative connotation to power, which is coercion, non-cooperative spirit, or breakdown of communication between the parties. And there are features of power which fascinated me, which is understanding this as a strength or weakness of the process, of the parties participating or reflecting on ourselves as mediator. But one particular feature of power is that the power shifts. And that is fascinating to watch as a mediator, which I never did or get to watch in any other role, because you have two parties in front of you, and you sometimes have some analysis of their power before the process starts. Of course, we think this party might come in as powerful from this perspective, and then surprisingly enough, the weaker perceived person comes as more powerful. And that is very interesting, because the fact is everyone comes with power, and how they use it or not use it defines it. So I was fascinated by this process of mediation, because we have to be ready to be curious and ready for surprises. We can't really have a process design in our mind which says, oh, this is how the power dynamics is going to unfold, and parties surprise you totally. So Nina, you have the same or similar experience, and how do you feel about that?
Yes, I think it's a kind of dance between the parties. And it matters, of course, how they feel about each other and how deep the conflict is as well. And if they have this perception of winning or losing, or that they are blaming the other a lot or not. So it's also about their maturity when they start the process, what they know about themselves, and if they are used to reflect over themselves or not.
Yeah. Vikram, you were saying something.
No, right now I'm just a spectator, because look.
Okay, no, I thought
because I want to see what interesting directions it takes, because there is so much around it. So I just felt that let's take it wherever it's going, because otherwise I just at this point don't want to direct it anywhere. I just find because this topic is so interesting, and it is a wide topic which needs a lot of discussion. So I'm at that point right now.
Okay, but I can continue then. I like the surprising, actually, because that is also what gives it all dynamics. Because if I, as a mediator, has fixed idea about how it will proceed, or I mean, I have a starting point, and then I think that I am how to say, it's possible for me to steer them in the right direction. You cannot do that, because whatever you think, every conflict has its own. It can be a family conflict, but there are so many different dynamics. So all conflicts are unique in a way. So therefore it will come with surprises, but also that's what I like.
So going back to our favorite person, probably Ken Cloke, I think that one concept, particularly the term that he coined, omnipartiality, is something that has literally freed my spirit as a mediator. And I think I was having discussions with Vikram, and of course, I've spoken to various friends of mine. It's very challenging to really, as a new mediator, when I started, it was very challenging for me to really be a neutral, in the sense of neutrality, or being impartial is different than being neutral, but actually being neutral sometimes almost connotes as if mediator should be just, stand by and watch what's happening and not to intervene. But that's very difficult from, first of all, I'm really passionate about fairness and equality and the power dynamics. And sometimes if you see the negative power playing out and actually it's happening under your watch, I did not like the idea that I'm not going to do anything as a mediator. But I didn't know the answer, because everyone speaks about mediator really allowing the parties to take charge of it. And our power comes from the stream of thought, which is predominantly, other than what Ken introduced, was if we don't think that what's going on is fair, we can terminate. And that's what is our power. That's where it comes from. Otherwise, it's a voluntary process, it's party-driven process, let them choose. But I didn't like that idea because I think it was very limited. It was actually making me uncomfortable to the extent that I felt that it was not ethical as a mediator if I saw that the power dynamics was playing out, one party controlling the other. And the other party can control the first one too, but because we said power shifts. But if we don't do anything about it, then what is the integrity of our process? And Ken's concept of omnipartiality literally freed my mind, because he talks about how we have as a mediator to be partial towards everyone. So it almost makes us, I feel like we are balancing the power and we are designing the process. And that's our role, actually. Designing the process doesn't really mean being superficial about who sits where and when someone talks and otherwise. But this is the core concept of understanding how to design our process. And I think this concept of omnipartiality is the best one that I think I've come across. So I'll open it up to you, Nina, Vikram.
Yeah, Nina's going to come in. Yeah, Nina.
I haven't really recognized that how to say that word in everything I read from him, but I like it as well. I tried to Google it at the same time you said it to keep up. But of course, we are all bringing some bias, and we are all, if I'm a mediator or a trained mediator, it doesn't mean that I don't have any conflicts in my own life, for example. So if I'm mediating a similar conflict, which I have had or are having in my life, of course, it will be more difficult for me to be neutral. But at the same time, I like this reflective practice to try to reflect over myself. And maybe we don't manage to be totally neutral or totally impartial because it's very, very difficult. But of course, we have to try to do our best in every setting we find ourselves. But we are all human beings, one way or another. And it's always okay to apologize. If I said something wrong, I can always say, okay, that was not the right question, or I apologize, can I take that back? I would like to rearrange my question, things like that. But also to manage the power imbalances, it's important as a mediator to manage the time. So one person cannot speak for 30 minutes and one only 5 minutes at a time, but and also the wording a bit, I mean, the ground rules are very important. So people are not interfering with what can be seen as disrespectful, things like that. So it's to manage the power is a lot of things in the process. So what do you think about that? Like it's not only so easy, it's a lot of things to think about.
That's fantastic, Nina. I think what you are talking about is being insightful and actually being self-reflective. And the word I think very close to what you're saying is being mindful. And it's not easy, actually. It's mindfulness practice. I've been trying for ages to be mindful, but the mind wanders. and actually watching ourselves do this job as a mediator and thinking about, am I actually focused on the present, focusing on what the parties are saying and not being judgmental? Frankly, it's difficult. People say that they have really learned how to be non-judgmental. I think I would say, to be very frank, I can keep my judgments aside as the best I could do, but I don't know if it's my training as a lawyer, which makes it more challenging. But yes, consciously, I try not to judge and allow that space for the parties. And I think the most important aspect that you have raised in saying what we bring to the table. So we see the world as we are. It's a very well-known quote, and I think that makes it quite crucial that we have mediators coming from all walks of life, understanding culture of the parties, understanding what's important for them, and understanding the power dynamics in that context. Because sometimes if that context is not known to the mediator, then it may not be understood what's happening between the parties. So definitely deep listening of what is happening within the parties' exchanges and watching the body language, as you said, Nina, controlling some of the process things within the process to make people feel safe is definitely crucial. I agree with you.
But
Yeah,
how
I'm
much?
also thinking-
Yeah, Nina,
Sorry.
please. No, please.
I'm also thinking about the pre-mediation phase. It's also very important in that regard, because then you can feel the pulse of them a bit, how far they are willing to go and how it all started, and also where they come from. For example, if you have very different cultures, if you mediate people from different cultures, there can be a lot of quiet rules that you don't know about because you're from a third culture. But I think we need to be patient, and we don't need to know everything because we can always ask.
So Sesh has joined us. Sesh, you want to maybe introduce yourself? Sesh is actually a very dear friend, and I won't say old because it's his birthday today, so he might not feel good about me saying old, but he's an old friend and a dear friend. So Sesh, you want to say hi to us? So Sesh, has he even heard me? I don't know. Let's see. He'll come in. Yeah, Nina, you were saying something?
Yeah, I was talking about.
Hi there. I'm trying to start the video. So
okay, but okay, up till that starts, you can at least say hi to that's Archana and Nina.
hello.
Hi.
Archana is based in
Hello,
Canada.
Sesh.
Nina is in Sweden. Yeah. So he's of course Sesh does work with the court-related mediation center, so he's involved there. Other than that, he'll tell us when he finally comes in at some point. But yeah, but Archana, in terms of your book, I mean, it's what do you bring out in the book? Do you bring out something on this aspect there?
Yes, so that book is actually focused on domestic violence, and particularly, I think it kind of connects what Nina is speaking about. So I was born and brought up in India, and then I came to Canada some 20 years ago and started practicing here. And people bring their culture with them, and culture is a mixed bag of things. It's some positive and some not so positive things, what people like to follow, and looking at it as a perspective which we call human-centered. I think the power and control or abuse I see as one person controlling the other, and it's actually um, not want to frame it as a human rights issue, which it is, but for mediation perspective, it's a huge power and control dynamics playing out. And these cases are, of course, ultimately ended up in family courts. I represented most of the uh, uh, survivors, but their experience in family court and the power dynamics, how to identify that and how it impacts, how abuse impacts not only the survivor, but children. And sometimes that's why it is important for us. So this book, when it's an open source, it's a free book. I'm happy to share the link in chat. It's translated in 7 different languages, including Hindi, Punjabi, and many other languages as well. These case studies are the real life stories of people. And although one person is narrating the story, I think storytelling is very powerful learning tool. So when we read these stories from one person's perspective, you can almost see the other players in the background. And particularly, I think that as a family mediator, we have to be mindful of people who are not at the table, and particularly children who don't necessarily have the voice as we want to understand what they want, how they feel, how they have been impacted by the conflict happening within the family. And then looking at it from the cultural perspective, if someone comes from other than the Canadian families, which is, we call it as FNIM families, which are considered to be the partners or parents and children, there are collective cultures like South Asian where the family means much more than that. Family members mean much more than that. But then the power dynamics becomes much more different than other parts or other cultures. So all of these perspectives were brought into by these case studies for learning. So we use this in a university where I teach as a textbook, where the students read the case study. They actually use this for role playing. And it's very interesting to see that because in role play, they get to take turns. So if in one role play, you are the husband, in the next role play, you are the wife, and you literally have out of body experience of perceiving things from the other person's perspective. And the third one, you are literally a mediator. And now you are actually understanding what's going through. So I think these are the resources sometimes that could allow people to see the complexities from the family dynamics, power imbalance, and actually the patterns of control at times. So screening, understanding whether this case is appropriate for mediation or not, all these aspects could be seen from these case studies.
Nina, you have some experiences like this?
Yes, I have some experience from working with women that migrated to Sweden. And I have also some experience myself living in another country. So I know that when you're not in your home country anymore, you're moving somewhere else. I became more Swedish than I have ever been in Sweden when I moved abroad. And also I think that sometimes the family trees are changing. So the kids, they learn the language much faster than the parents. And the power balance in the family itself change. And maybe if the father has been if it has been a hierarchic family with the man in power, when they lose power and they don't have any words, it can create violence. It doesn't mean they are bad people or that they have a bad culture or things like that. But I think there can be different pressure, which shows itself in power imbalances.
But one thing, Archana, I mean, we have to also discuss the perception of the mediator by the parties when you are actually handling a power imbalance situation. So, do you have some thoughts on that, Archana?
Yeah,
Um,
so, oh,
yeah,
sorry, Nina.
sorry. No. You go on, Ankan.
Okay, so Vikram, I think it's a very crucial thing as a mediator to be self-aware, but then see how the parties are viewing you. And I think that's what you're bringing out. So particularly working in the with more vulnerable people, and then coming into the world of mediation, where I think what your brain is tuned to learn and understand, I think it never goes away. So I have always looked at people in the sense of what they're bringing, sometimes more than their stories, more than what they're really asking for as a relief or what they term as issues. I think the big thing sometimes is to understand trauma and understanding trauma, its impact, what has happened with these parties in the past, which may or may not be relevant to what they're discussing right now at your mediation table. But the impact of what their experiences have been in the past and how they present themselves and what can trigger that trauma, and how can you really bring positivity on your mediation table, and how do you really appreciate these parties fully engaging, participating in the sense of bringing positivity to the process, giving them really a good pathway as a mediator to even say something smallest and positive happened. You always acknowledge and say, this is great. Even this is not the big issue that they have resolved. But then the law of reciprocity. Sometimes if there is this upward spiral that's being created on your mediation table, one says good thing, the other picks up on that good thing, and the cycle of positivity brings up. And if you can create that, it's not something illusionary or false. There is goodness in everyone. And people can actually focus on their interests if that happens. Because the neurology, and we have learned the neuroscience now as a mediator, being aware of what's actually the brain science talking to us, is how do you actually allow people to calm down and use the calm part of their brain to participate or engage in discussions of conflict resolution. So as a mediator, can we do that? Or am I doing it? And being mindfully bringing those aspects at the mediation table is always helpful.
Yes, Nina, you were saying something?
Yeah, I think what the power of the mediator is to rearrange how to say the thoughts in the parties in a way when they are expressing something toxic, and we ask questions to make them transform that to something positive, just as you say. That is the power of the training of a mediator, and to do that in as much neutral and impartial way as possible. And that when it happens, it's like when you're in a room like that and that happens, it clears, everything. It's very, how to say, it's a beautiful moment when it happens. It can be a long way to go there, but when it happens, everybody knows in the room that something changed.
Well, the main thing is that I'm trying to bring out this kind of a fine balance where you are going to be handling a power imbalance, but you still have to be perceived as a person who's still trying to bring them together, and that kind of a balance there. So I don't know, what do you think, Archana? Is there something that you want to bring out in that?
So it could again be seen as something unpleasant that is actually playing out. And I think, Nina, you referred to the ground rules. So how do you really, because we are not judges, we don't technically have the power to make orders or allow, we can direct the parties. And I'm actually I believe in facilitation, and I'm not very evaluative. So I think if you are evaluative in a way, controlling the power dynamics is easy, but that's not probably the best way of doing things. But it might work in some settings where there are transactional aspects involved, maybe monetary, financial aspects. But if there are other issues where power dynamics is playing out, as a mediator, I think you have to intervene. And that's basically what omnipartiality is all about. You have to sense what is the source of this power. And it could very well be someone who has the knowledge better than the other, and that's playing out. It's someone being destructive and trying to really take control of the process. Or it could very well be the needs of someone's finances, and that really allows this one person to control the other. Some aspects could be spiritual, cultural, which could be very subtle and may not be clearly seen. And that's why being aware as a mediator and actually intervening when you see that there is a power dynamics playing out is really important. So I actually have some questions that I ask myself, if I can say some of the examples of that. So the first question is the power real or perceived? Sometimes people pretend to be something that they are not, but then it can sometimes topple that balance of power. So as a mediator, you ask yourself, is it real or perceived by you as a mediator or between the parties? And that leads sometimes at a point where we can assess what's happening better than what we don't understand otherwise. Is the power being used to dominate or control the other party? And that's really useful to ask that question as well, because if it is to influence the other party to have the outcome that I want as a party A over party B, then it's of course a part of negotiation. But if it is bigger than that, then it really becomes a concern. Then it becomes abusive power. Then it becomes negative power. Sometimes you will actually see that someone has actually on paper or perceived power, which is just because that party is better off, well off financially, is more sophisticated. But is that party using that power to influence the other or not? And sometimes it could very well be multidimensional. We may not really understand what's happening. I take exhaustive notes when I mediate. And it would be funny if I say, I've recently started using the Cornell method of taking notes. So it's like the page is divided into 3 parts. So one is, of course, you are taking notes. Left-hand side is you are taking the themes, and the bottom is the conclusion or summary of that. And I use that format when I take notes as a mediator. And the themes emerge, and it's very interesting to see that left-hand side column, which definitely has a lot of reflection on what's happening between the parties as power dynamics. And these questions allow me to focus on the power dynamics and intervene whenever necessary. And that intervention could look like, and designing process is my other interest. So then if the power is destructive on the table, then you think about what your design looks like. You take a pause, you caucus, you separate the parties if needed, and redesign the process if required. And that's basically, I think, what ultimately has to happen as a mediator.
Yes,
I don't know if I answered your question, Vikram.
Well, I mean, to a point, to a certain extent, but I still have a little more on that aspect which needs to be, I think, discussed, because I feel that is an important part of how things work. But doesn't matter. But Nina, is there something that you wanted to put in there?
I think the most important thing is no harm. I mean, no harm, and that can be difficult. But of course, we need to intervene if there is an abusive power going on, because to come to any agreement, they need to be how to say, on the same level. Otherwise, that will not be impossible. And maybe if it goes on and on and on, maybe it's not a good case to mediate. I don't know, because if it's any destructive power can be abusive. And if we don't manage that, of course, we need to intervene.
See, other thing, Archana, we have to also discuss the aspect of handling power imbalance in a mediation and activism, advocacy, all those fine lines that come in. Where do you really fit in that aspect of it, Archana? What do you say?
So as a mediator, I think I have really matured over a period of time. When I started actually looking at anything other than right-based, because I came into the field of law because I, of course, was very passionate, and I still, I am very passionate about people's vulnerabilities and making the world a just place, and building peace. So these are bigger themes which really might look like very cheesy, but that's what motivated me to be in the profession and still keeps me there. That we have to contribute to make the one family at a time world a better place. And I think that as a person who you are as a litigator, you could be a different person as a mediator, because I think it's a different space, it's a different process. And it was very difficult to have that transition. And as a mediator, I think, again, quoting Ken, he says that law is the floor or the foundation of what you would do, but then what you have in that remaining space is unlimited. And allowing that magic of mediation to play, but of course, make it a process that's fair to both parties, and understanding power dynamics within that is important. So one of the mediators that I trained with gave me this metaphor, which stays with me always. And she actually, when I was co-mediating with her at the very beginning of my practice as a mediator, we had a couple very young, and they were venting. It's like they were blaming each other. They brought a young baby who was few months old, who was in the stroller, and they came in for mediation, and they just needed to vent at each other. And I saw that she didn't intervene and allowed them to vent. And of course, the baby started crying. So one went, the other went, and they took turns. At one point, I think they calmed down, and then they started engaging on actually what needed to be discussed. So during the debriefing, I said, didn't you see that what was happening was a chaos? And how did you not think that as a mediator, there was a need for intervention? And she said, that's not our role. This is their life. These people are going to decide what do they want. If they want to walk out from here, they can. But if they needed to have their emotions, which are negative, which could sound scary at times, of course, they were not abusing in the sense of abuse, but they were venting. They were actually blaming each other and asking questions of each other. And she said, we have to allow that to happen. It takes a lot of strength as a mediator to let that chaos play out before it starts becoming something that makes sense. And she said, mediation is like an African folktale. There is no beginning, there is no end. It just keeps on flowing. and the parties can pick up the storyline where they want to pick up and take it further. I think Mediator Vikram, you are doing the same as well. You are letting us pick up the stories and take it further. But I think that's how I think the different process, which sometimes makes me feel that I'm a different person when I mediate. And it's a conscious training and learning of skills that I can keep my advocacy aside, but still keep my passion of equality and being fair with omnipartiality and being part of the process and keeping the integrity of the process. So I think it is the same theme, but it's seen differently and shaped differently.
Yeah, because finally things are about perception, and the whole concept of mediation not being perceived as an activism or advocacy in relation to handling power imbalance by the mediator. So that part of it also, I think we have to be a little careful there. I just wanted to expand that discussion. So Nina, you want to come in, and then I'll ask Jawad to at least say hi to us. He's hiding somewhere, doesn't know that we can see him even if he doesn't show himself to us. So Jawad, please come in. Nina's just talking about this. Then I'll get you in. I'll get you in 1 minute. Yes, Nina, on this aspect of it.
I think what you said, that it's the perceived injustice or that is creating a lot of things. But of course, for the person perceiving it, it's for real. But the issues which the parties are bringing to the table are not necessarily what's it all about. There are a lot of underlying lines which you have to dig a bit to understand. And I think that is what the mediation process is all about. And as Arkana said, the storytelling, I am in love with the storytelling, because I think that's a very important part of it, because you can make, every party can make their voice heard without interruption, and just bringing their perception to the table. And just being heard can sometimes open up things that were closed. But also when people are very angry at each other, of course, you can let it out for a while, but when it starts repeating and it becomes a pattern in mediation, you also need to stop it one way or another. So as a mediator, sometimes you need to intervene quite harshly, I think, to how to say, to make the party think a bit deeper. So of course, you should not steer the process, but sometimes to create no harm, and I mean to keep the balance, you need to do something which makes sense.
Yeah. So Jawad, you disappeared again. Are you coming in? This is the time, Jawad. You'll have to unmute yourself. Yes. Hi, Jawad.
Yeah, Vikram.
Yes.
I'm not hiding. Because I thought I had signed in a little early into some other sessions, so I just.
Let me tell you, Jawad, you've signed into all sessions. By being a panelist in the conference, you've signed into all sessions. You are free to come in wherever. So, I mean, it's not limited to the ones that you said.
Okay.
Because the ones that you said that you gave the question, you gave the topic. Yes, you have to be there, which is what I told you. So Archana gave this topic here. So first, Archana is based in Canada. Nina is in Sweden. Jawad is in India.
Hi, Archana.
And
Jawad hi, Nina. Hi, Archana. Nice meeting both of you.
Jawad will bring in some very interesting insights, I'm telling you. So Jawad, basically it's power imbalance and mediation. So what are your thoughts on that? Well, I won't take you whatever we discussed, but that will take a little too much time. So just what your thoughts on that part are?
Well, I think, one, I feel that invariably there is going to be some power imbalance in a mediation. But the question is, how much is there? Because the power imbalance can come from many factors. I don't know what Archana and Nina have spoken about this, but there can be so many factors. One of the factors can be whether one party has some information which the other party does not have. The second might be that one party has better legal advice and is better prepared for the negotiation than the other party who is not receiving the same kind of legal advice. I think that was something that, though I did not watch it, from what I heard about from reports, Johnny Depp and his wife's name is Heard. I don't know what's the first name. Amber Heard. Yeah, Amber Heard. I think that was one of the cases where I think the legal representation, I'm told, of Amber was not really up to the mark. Whereas Johnny's representation was very good. Of course, that is litigation. But in mediation also we encounter such cases. The third imbalance I feel can arise from basically the parties' relationship vis-a-vis each other. So where one party might be more aggressive and a more forceful personality as compared to the other party, where the other party might feel intimidated in the presence of that party. So these are all, I feel, the ways in which the imbalance may arise in the mediation. And I think one of the things that mediators try to do is to see whether this balance can be restored by adopting different techniques, perhaps involving the lawyers in a more engaging way, having more private sessions, trying to understand whether in some way this, I don't know whether, because see, basically we are not playing an advisory role over there, so we really can't advise anyone. And we can't definitely suggest, for example, if the legal representation is not really effective or the party doesn't have enough legal advice, then it becomes an issue because we can't point out to the lawyer's deficiency or whatever, incompetence or whatever. So it becomes a challenge for the mediators at times. Like I was mediating a case where there was this very elderly couple who had entered into a contract with the builder. And what the builder did was he got them to sign some papers. And, the couple were really old, and the wife could not see, and the man could not, his hearing was badly affected. And he was sitting there in the mediation and virtually pleading with the builder. And the builder didn't seem to be having any kind of, any kind of compassion at all. I mean, it was inhuman watching his expressions and the way he was treating this couple. Well, I tried here to talk to the lawyers and see whether we can bring about some equality in terms of the negotiating equality between the parties. But what I realized was I sensed that even the lawyers were not really helping this couple. This was a court-referred mediation, fortunately, and I therefore sent it back to the court. Hoping that at least there they will get justice, because I realized that as a mediator, I'm having limited powers as such, in the sense that mediators don't have any powers in mediation. So we are merely facilitators. So I realized that there was nothing much that I could do to really raise the position of the couple as opposed to that of the builder. Because he had the best legal advice and he was quite strong, and he was holding all the papers in his hand, which according to the couple, these were all, he told them that he's like their son, and he will look after them like how he would look after his own parents. So all these rosy promises were made, and they trusted him blindly, and they kept signing paper upon paper. And now he had all this, and he was holding it against them. So it is, cases like this do come up, and especially I'm sure that I don't know whether Archana and Nina have done family mediations, matrimonial mediations, where sometimes, especially in a culture like India, sometimes the women may feel very intimidated in the presence of the husband. So I had this mediation where the very first session, the wife won't open her mouth, and she was very uncomfortable sitting over there. So I had to start off with private sessions. And that was when she really opened up with the private session. And the flow of information was something that was really amazing. And through the private sessions, I continued the mediation throughout in private sessions. And finally, when we were able to reach an agreement, I brought them together. And by that time, she was feeling sufficiently empowered. And she could sit with her husband and face him and, and tell him that this is what she wants. So I think that those are some of the things that we can perhaps do by, very subtly, helping the parties to find their own ground. But beyond that, because the role is very limited, what we can do. So I think what is very important, I feel that, invariably, as I said earlier, that there is bound to be some inequality in almost every mediation. But we have to, decide for ourselves, how far is this? Are we in a position where through various techniques that we use as mediators, will we be in a position to, maintain a kind of a balance where the parties are able to take decisions, understanding all the pros and cons and understanding where their real interests lie? And if you're able to do that, nothing like it. But if there is a huge disparity in the power of the parties, I think the best way to do is to, send them to perhaps fora which would provide them with justice.
Archana, anything from what Jawad has taken us through? Because I'll come back to Jawad on the aspect of what the omni-partiality that you had mentioned. We'll take his view on that also. But based on what he said right now, anything that you want to bring in? And then Nina, after that, you also, please, on what Jawad said. Yeah, Archana.
Yeah, so I think that Jawad brings us back to the circle where we started from. He is talking about the power differential, the concept of how much is the difference of power between the parties. It's always going to be there because there could very well be shifting of their power for various aspects of the dispute playing out. But I think I would just like to take it to the level of what Nina was referring earlier, which is actually what I see as real difference between what Jawad is referring as litigation and I do court-connected mediations as well. But I think the biggest strength of mediation is possibility of transformation, which is not necessarily available in litigation. You can really allow people to think outside of the box, think besides what are the issues, and allow them to heal, allow them to apologize if required, if they want to do it, allow them to really not think about the legal consequences and think about creative problem solving. And that transformation can happen only in mediation, irrespective of the challenges of power imbalances. If done right, they can really see the world in a different way. And I love this futuristic aspect of mediation, that it's not actually finding of a fault, what happened in the past. Of course, they need to build on some of the negativity which is brewing amongst themselves probably. But I think what is the successful mediation, we need to really look at that as well from the dynamics of power. And it may or may not be that they have agreement on the issues that they identified. It could very well be just understanding the other party's position better. Jawad, you gave example of this woman who was not able to speak up her mind, and you did the designing of process piece, you did the shuttle mediation, and then eventually she felt empowered. And that's the magic of mediation. That's the power of mediation. And I think that sometimes people can speak up, sometimes they can't. So our job is to screen and see if this case is appropriate for mediation or not. And if it is not, understanding the limits of this process, understanding the limits of us or ourselves as a mediator is crucial at the end of the day as well.
Yes. So, Nina, you want to come in?
Yeah, I think actually we, all of us more or less in the whole of the world, we are brought up with the fear of conflict. We think it's something that is only negative, it's uncomfortable, it's noisy, it's chaos, it can lead to depression, things like that. But if we start thinking about conflict like something that can transform us all and we can develop together, because that is what's happening. And if we look at the win-win in mediation, everybody can win. So I think in mediation, how to say, the parties are allowed to be themselves, maybe for the first time in their lives. And I think that is very, very powerful. So I like that. And I think it doesn't matter if one party has more power than the other to start with, because if in a successful mediation, both of them are empowered in the different ways and the different needs that they have uniquely.
Yeah. But Jawad, the only thing is that, of course, we won't have too much time, but the issues that we, needed to discuss, and which, of course, on the omnipartiality aspect, on the other thing, the line between the role of a mediator in the relation to not going towards advocacy and activism, and that part of it, something on that. And I think maybe because I think the next session we'll have to start on time, you know that. So maybe in about, only we have about 2 minutes or 3 minutes if you just want to throw some light on these aspects.
I think both Archana and Nina have very rightly pointed out, because one of the, if I may call it as a magical thing in mediation, is that there is a definite possibility of a transformation happening, because the conflict interaction getting transformed between the parties. Because basically there, there are two things that come into play. One is empowerment, and the other is recognition. And that is what transformative mediation also talks about. Because as you talk with the parties, and if you're empowering them to express themselves freely in a safe environment where they can safely talk to each other, and create a situation where they are able to, whatever their fears and concerns or even their emotions, let them express them freely. And once that expression happens, it is there that the recognition steps in, because once you feel empowered, because all the time when you're feeling that you're a victim and you're at the receiving end, you tend not to see anything beyond what you're going through. But the moment you start feeling that sense of empowerment, then you start looking at the other person's point of view. And that is where I think the recognition comes, and that's where the transformation comes. And I agree with both what Nina said and as well as what Archana said, because that is perhaps mediation is the only process where this is possible. I don't think it's possible in litigation. I don't think it's possible in arbitration. But for that, of course, mediator has to be really skillful in, the interventions of the mediator have to be to the minimum, and perhaps only, to the, on the aspect of perhaps reframing something that the parties are talking about, and, helping them to move along and have that conversation. So basically, mediation is all about, having a conversation with each other and trying to understand each other's perspectives. So it takes time, it takes a lot of patience, but that is the magic of mediation.
But the thing is, only thing, we won't get too much time to get into it, but I would have wanted to touch on the aspect of the whole concept of how mediation happened in the traditional system, and how you had people with a certain social standing being mediators, and was that good for the process, not good for the process, for them to be able to handle the power imbalance part of it. Because one, of course, you came through the religious route and you had the priests and rabbis and doing it at the other end, like I said, people with high social standing. So I think that aspect we might, of course, we won't be able to touch. I think right now we'll just have to close it. So I think what I will do is, I won't get everyone a chance to conclude. I'll just give Archana the chance to conclude, only because she had suggested the topic. So Archana, you want to just do a little concluding kind of thing?
Oh my God, I feel like my ears are getting red now because I feel like big responsibility on my shoulder. Okay, thank you. So I just want to take the theme, and as you said, Vikram, the conversation can continue another time, but I think the concept and tool of intersectionality, people's multiple identities of gender, race, sexuality, and their cultural and religious standing, and how they see the world and how they see the dispute, how that dispute can sometimes convert in conflict. And underlying all of these is the power imbalances. And if we can understand these complexities, then again, to quote what Ken says, that if the problem is complex, the process has to be complex enough. We can't have simplistic processes to solve complex problems. So as a mediator, we have to be patient, we have to be mindful, insightful, listen to people, and we can be omnipartial and allow the parties to feel safe and discuss their differences and problem solve. So I think.
Perfect. Well, I'll tell you, this is really like just on time kind of situation. So I'll just have to thank all of you, because I immediately have to start that one. So thank you very much, Archana, Nina, Jawad, for coming in. Always a pleasure discussing these topics. And of course, we have to take it forward in other discussions. So thank you very much. I'll cut this and let me start that. So thank you.